Everybody, Dave here, Hidden Freedom. In this video, I'm going to go over the reasons why I failed at early retirement, the things that I learned after being retired for 10 months, and finally, share what I plan to do about it going forward. Let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So let me provide a little backstory and context. Back in about 2014, 2015 time frame, I was traveling extensively for work, living in a hotel about 6 months out of the year, and traveling to various places around the United States, and including outside of the United States. So often what I would do when I was traveling is I would find local places to hike. When I was working in Seattle, when I was working in upstate New York. There's a lot of places where you can go hike in those areas. Often what I would do is just spend the weekend hiking instead of flying home just for 2 days to fly right back and then work a whole nother week. So why not just see the local area, go hiking, something I really enjoy. All expenses paid by my company that I work for. They paid for me to live in the hotel. They paid for the rental car. It was probably cheaper for me to just stay there versus flying home on the weekends. So that's often what I did. So in 2015, I turned 40 while vacationing down in Costa Rica. And when I got back from that vacation, the 40s hit me real tough. For anybody that's turning 40, Anyways. As I was sitting in a hotel researching local hiking trails in upstate New York, I came across the Appalachian Trail. Now, the Appalachian Trail is a 2,200 mile long through hike across 14 states. It's over 464,000 feet of elevation change, and it often takes people about 6 months to complete. And for some reason, Dave being Dave, I'm like, you know what? I want to do that. That's something that it sounds like it's a challenge, and I want to do that. So I started looking at it, and what am I going to do? How am I going to take off 6 months off of work? That's not something that people do. The company's probably not going to let me do that. All I get is a month off, and that is not enough time to do a 6-month hike. Now, when people are in good shape, they can do it in about 4 months and maybe even shorter than that. But typically, it takes 6 months. So I'm like, I can't quit. I'm young. I'm 40 years old, but I want to hike this before I get any older. So one thing about me is once I decide to do something, I go full X Games mode into making it happen. And I want to make it happen as soon as possible. I hate things that get in my way and prevent me from making things happen right away. I started doing a lot of research, stumbled about how I can, live off of money that I've, accumulated after working in Qatar for 2 years. I put away a substantial amount of money in that amount of time, but it really wasn't enough to retire. At this point, I had about $780,000 to my name. Some of it was tied up in real estate, some of it was tied up in the stock market. But I really didn't know a lot about, retiring early and making an investment last a long time or anything like that. So what I ended up doing was I stumbled across Mr. Money Mustache and his website blog, and it was just got really interested going down the rabbit hole of reading about early retirement through a lot of what he was, sharing in his blog about index investing, the 4% rule. I had never heard of the Trinity study, and how to come up with a basic number for retirement. So this is about the 2014-2015 time frame. That's when I came up, or when I first learned about, the annual expenses times 25 times. My expenses were super low because I lived in a hotel for 6 months of the year. Now, that is not typical though, right? So can you really use that number, right? So I would say my expenses were about $3,000 a month, maybe about back then. Obviously I could live super cheap. So I times that by 25, and then I just came up with a number of 1.25 million I needed to retire. With the 780 minus 1.25, I didn't have too much longer to go. but it was still, a few years off, right? So it was a little frustrating that I couldn't go hike the trail right away. I spent a lot of that time over the next several years just dialed in my hiking gear, doing a lot of research there while I was working and putting away 70% of my take home pay, in addition to obviously stocking away a bunch of capital in the 401k, and pretty much once I got an HSA, maxing that out as well. So fast forward just a little bit, I spent 7 years working and saving, investing like clockwork, often saving and investing over 70% of my take-home pay for those 7 years. I don't really believe I saved much more than that. It was pretty much, there wasn't really much left over to spend on what I wanted to spend it on. Obviously, I bought hiking gear over those 7 years, and, I went kind of a little hog wild on that, but it is what it is. I wanted to make sure that I would enjoy my hike, and that's one of the things about hiking it a little bit older. You can spend a little bit of money on the hike, have lighter gear, the most updated gear, and make the hike a little bit more enjoyable. So fast forward to the good old beer virus, and I had I don't know, probably 1.8 million dollars saved up and in various investments. I had started basically, in 2019, I wanted to start the hike in 2020 was my goal, but then the whole pandemic happened. It put a little bit of a wrench in that. Obviously, back in 2018, I've talked about this in other videos, but I started to work on moving assets around and getting prepared for her early retirement, reducing tax burdens and whatnot after I retire. So when 2020 came around, I just it wasn't the right time to retire. The pandemic made things tough, and I know for that particular year, everybody was pretty much forced to get off the trail because of all the little towns shutting down. So fast forward to 2021, I pretty much was getting near the number that I wanted to get to, so I pretty much determined that I wanted to hike the trail in 2022. So as the pandemic was dying down and they weren't required masks anymore, and all the other little towns and stuff were not requiring anybody to wear masks in their little towns and all that stuff. So I decided to just make 2022 the year that I'm going to go ahead and hike the trail. And at this point, pretty much had everything dialed in. I spent most of 2021 just getting my assets where I wanted them to be, making sure I had enough dividend income to support my hike. So when I started the hike in 2022, which was June-ish time frame, I had roughly about $40,000 coming in from dividends, not to mention I also had some note income and some interest income coming in. So I had plenty of capital coming in to do the hike, but I also was living off of my high yield savings account, which I had roughly about $25,000 in that account, and that's what I actually lived on while I was hiking the trail. So the dividends actually just got reinvested back into the portfolio as I was hiking the trail. When I finished the trail 175 days later, in November, late November, just before Thanksgiving, I had pretty much depleted almost all of my savings at that point, paying for bills, but paying for the trail. The trail cost me roughly about $15,000. By the time I added in town food and all that, it cost me about $15,000. And trust me, that is not typical. That is a lot higher than what almost everybody's going to spend on the trail. But I did not want to, I wanted to make things, I wanted to pretty much platinum blaze the entire trail. I didn't want to think about money. I just wanted to make everything convenient for me. I wanted to buy better food if I could afford it, and obviously if I could get it. And that's going to a little bit play into what happened after the trail. After I completed the trail, I traveled back to Colorado and was living in a hotel there. And I was figuring out what I was going to do next. I had plans of going over to Thailand, and I had plans to pretty much travel around in cheap countries. That's what my plan was. I had health care through the exchange, and I still had a lot of dividends coming in from Devo and Jeppy. Money wasn't really an issue. A matter of fact, my portfolio was probably grown, I think, from since then. 2022 is a rough year for the stock market, but near the end of 2022, it started coming up a little bit. And then as we started to get to 2023, things started to improve. And, as of today, when I recorded this video, my net worth is at an all-time high by a couple $100,000. So money really wasn't the issue. However, let me come back to that in a second here. So when I got back from the trail, my stomach was not feeling very good. I had a lot of inflammation in my gut, and just my body wasn't adjusting very well to better food, which is kind of surprising because as I was on the trail eating a bunch of junk food along the way, because that's all you're going to eat really is just town food, and you're going to resupply at gas stations and Dollar Generals, maybe some grocery stores if you can find those. I always tried to buy better stuff if I could. I did not eat, a lot of the other stuff that people were eating on the trail. But so I did try to do better with that, but at the same time, 6 months of eating like that, gluten and whatnot, when I got back, my stomach just wasn't feeling right. So I decided to cancel my trip to Thailand, even though I booked a villa there for a month and booked plane tickets. And I figured I'd just stay in the States for a little while to fix my gut. What I ended up doing is just, obviously, when I was living in a hotel for over a month and having a rental car and all that stuff, it was starting to play on my mind as expenses were coming out big time to pay for a rental car and hotels. Hotels are not cheap if you stay in them for 30 days. Rental cars are not cheap when you stay in those for 30 days. You might get a discount staying in there for 30 days, but it still adds up significantly. So that was playing on my mind. My stomach really wasn't improving much. So what I ended up doing was I ended up buying a RV, a 45-foot bus, and I found a place to park it for $500 a month. Plus I have to pay for internet, and I also have to pay for electricity. But it is also a cheap way for me to live. That is where I live right now, as I live in a 45-foot bus, which I'll probably do a walk around in an upcoming video and just share. Maybe I'll actually share the inside as well. I live super cheap right now at less than $2,000 a month, and that includes food, that includes, a storage in Colorado, includes a bunch of other business expenses and whatnot. So I live super cheap. Less than $24,000 a year I live right now. That really was not the reason why I went back to work. So I went back to work because this bus is a money pit. At least when I first bought it, it was. I got a lot of things dialed in right now, but still, tires are $1,000 a piece. There's 8 of those things on this bus. I had to buy new house batteries. That's $3,000. Any little thing breaks in here and it's $2,000, right? So there's a lot of stuff in this RV that they don't make anymore, so it's very hard to get those items if you can get them. I feel like, when I got this bus, that was a big driving factor for me for going back to work, because I felt like I was just being drained. So that was one lesson I learned. I'll talk about that as well in a second, because that is kind of a key thing for me, I think, that I don't like. So I did go back to work in February of 2023, and so I've been working for the last 9 months or so. Now that I've pretty much provided the backstory of the retirement and retired for 10 months and why I went back to work, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I learned that I liked and some of the things that I learned that are not going to work for me. So a couple things I did like was I like monthly dividends coming in, but I might not be doing that in the future. I have to think about it. I actually might be just selling off shares of SPY, as my portfolio is over 3,000 shares of SPY at this time. I might just be going the route of just selling off a little bit of those every year, with the combination of a little bit of dividends. Obviously SPY pays 1.5% as well. and a combination of my other investments, notes, real estate notes, and a combination of options and a combination of some interest income coming in, I can perfectly live, just fine where I'm at, right? Because I'm only at $2,000 a month here to live. So that is one thing I liked. I liked dividends coming in. I like getting paid monthly because it makes I don't have to wait as long. If I want to spend some money on the bus, I don't have to plan it out and I can get it fixed right away. I don't have to stress about it. I seem to be a stressor when I can't fix something and I can't buy something right away. So one thing I also learned is I do not like when I have to spend money on something and I'm on a fixed income. So for example, if you retire and you don't have a house, but you plan on buying a house, that house is going to be a money pit, or it could be, right? At least what I plan on doing. I want to buy a house with some acreage, and when I purchase that house, you're going to probably want to buy some stuff for it. You're going to probably want to buy, shop stuff. You can buy some tools, and be on a fixed income without having a job. I just do not want to take money out of principal to buy that stuff. And the money coming in from dividends or just from natural growth and selling portions of SPY or something like that is just too slow for me. I don't want to be waiting around for months to get things that I need to get done to, basically make my life better and do things that I enjoy. If you do not have hobbies, and that's saying something as well, because if you have expensive hobbies, that's going to cost money. And one thing about being retired is, especially when you're younger, you're going to spend more money in retirement. That's one thing I didn't realize, right? Because there's nothing to do, right? You're at home. What are you going to just sleep and watch TV all day? No, you're going to want to do things. And some of those things are going to cost money. And for some people, those things can be expensive. For me, if I want to work on cars and invest in building race cars or something like that, that costs some money. And one thing about having a job is, and I can live super cheap, is I can spend all that money that I make on discretionary stuff. I can just go and buy that stuff anytime I want. I can buy any tool that I want. And in tools and investment into your future. Once you buy it once, you can use it over and over and over again. Once you invest those tools, it's a one-time purchase, right? So that's one thing I just learned about myself is, once you retire, the hobbies that I'm going to have, and because I know myself, they're going to require money. And the more time you have, the more money you're probably going to spend, because you're just going to be looking at things. Oh, I want to do this, and it requires some money. That may not be the case for everybody, but for some people, if they get into mountain biking, a mountain bike could be $3,000 to $5,000, right? It's just, I think it's a case by case for everybody. That's one thing I learned though is, for me, I like to be able to spend on the things that I want to spend on whenever I want to spend on. And for me right now, that is, building my tool list up. One thing I did not want to do, and I probably will have a problem doing with this for at least for the foreseeable future, is spending down principal. I did not like that. Now, I never did spend down principal at all the entire 10 months. And even when I bought the bus, I just, that came out of the options account. I did not have to sell stocks to buy this bus at all. One thing I do not want to do is have to sell principal, other than if I'm selling shares of SPY to live. But I'm not 100% sure I'm even going to go that route yet. I have to figure that out. But I do not want to sell principal to fund repairs and fund the way I live right now. And that is one driving factor of part of the reason why I went back to work. The other reason why is I got super bored. Nobody I know is retired. Brother's not retired. And no friends I know are retired. And what are you going to do in Thailand? You're just going to sit in a hotel over there or a villa over there. Yeah, you can explore the town. You can go to the beach. It sounds great, right? But it does get boring after, a week of doing the same thing. Sure, you can travel around, but traveling costs money, right? It's super cheap to travel in those countries, and that is something I'm still going to look at doing. but I think I need an adjustment period. So right now I'm just stocking away more capital, 70% of my take-home pay, maxing out the 401k, maxing out the HSA, still building my portfolio, 3,000 shares in SPY. So I'm just padding the investments at this point. In the future plan, which I'll share in a upcoming video, and my new retirement date, I'll share it in an upcoming video as well. But one thing I learned is now that I've hiked the trail, I don't feel like I'm forced to. I don't feel like there's a deadline for me. Like, it's just not eating. It's not eating at me right now. Like, I don't feel like I have to retire. I don't feel like that I have to quit work to go hike a trail because I'm getting older. That's done. It was successful. I finished it. And now that I feel like I'm back, I'm working, I'm making good money, I'm living life, I'm living in my RV, living cheap. Now it's time to focus on what I'm going to do next, when I'm going to retire next, and let my portfolio grow. And hopefully by then, my brother will be retired, and then we can figure out where we're gonna go from there. But I'm also going to share in an upcoming video my new plan on when I'm going to retire permanently. At least that's what I think. And obviously, the investments will be growing, continue to grow, as I'll continue to stock more money into the stock market and let it ride. So if you have any comments, questions, or concerns about this video, let me know down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.